Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir.
Shall we start the session now? Shall we start the session?
Yes, sir.
Whether everybody has joined? Hello.
Hello. Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Shall we start now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. The screen is visible to you.
Yes, sir. We can see.
Okay. Today we shall discuss JSP, Java Server Pages. JSP stands for Java Server Pages. In the last class, we had a discussion on servlet. Servlets are pure Java programs. Servlets are executed at the server side. As you know, in a client server communication model, client is at one side and server is at other side. It is the responsibility of the client to send request to the server for getting any resources. When requests are sent to the server processes the request. So request processing is done by the servlets. Servlets are Java programs. Specialized Java programs that is developed for request processing. That is what servlet is. The counterpart of servlet is JSP. JSP is another technology for that purpose. So JSP is a web technology. In place of servlet, JSP can be used at the server side for processing client's request. So there are two technology. One is servlet, another is JSP. Both are used for request processing. Both are executed at the server side. Then why there are two technologies? Why not one? If the purpose is same, what servlet does exactly, JSP also does the same thing. If the purpose of two technology are same, then why there are two technology? So there is a difference between servlet and JSP. The main difference is servlet is a Java program, whereas JSP is not a Java program. Servlet is a pure Java program, that is a Java class. Using Java language, servlets are developed. But JSPs are not Java programs, are not pure Java programs. JSP is fundamentally, it is a HTML page incorporated with Java code. I assume that you must be knowing what an HTML page is. So JSP is a HTML page included with some Java codes. So when a HTML page is included with Java codes, it becomes a JSP page. So fundamental difference between servlet and JSP is servlet is a pure Java program, whereas JSP is a HTML page included with some Java code. That is the difference between servlet and JSP. But purpose remains the same. Both are used for request processing at server side. This is number one. Number two is server is a Java enabled server. As server is a Java enabled server like Tomcat, Apache Tomcat, that is a completely Java enabled server. That means it has got the capability to execute only Java programs, nothing else. So server has the capability to execute only Java programs. As servlets are pure Java programs, they can be executed by the server. But as far as JSP is concerned, JSP is a HTML page. So server do not have the capability to execute a HTML page. So servers are directly executed by the server. Servlets are directly executed by the server, whereas JSP cannot be executed by the server. If JSP files are not executed by the server, then how request processing is done at the server side? The fundamental thing is servlets does request processing, JSP also does request processing. But servlets are directly executed by the server, JSP cannot be executed by the server. When JSP is not executed by the server, then how request processing is done by the JSP? That is the question. So to address this question, before request processing, a JSP page gets translated into a servlet. When client sends the request to the server checks whether it is a servlet or it is a JSP page. If it is a servlet, then it is all right, well and fine. Server directly executes that for request processing. If it is a JSP page, server checks whether it is a JSP page or a servlet. If it is a JSP page, then translation is done before request processing. JSP page gets translated into servlet. After translation, then only server executes the servlet and request processing happens. So that is the primary difference between JSP and servlet. This is what is written here. The basic difference between JSP and servlets. Now, the fundamental question is, when there are two technologies used for the same purpose, then which one is more advantageous to use? Whether servlets are more advantageous to use or JSP pages are more advantageous to use? That is the obvious question that may arise. So the answer to this question is JSP page is more advantageous to use than servlets. Why? Because less technicality is involved in developing a JSP page. because JSP is not a pure Java program. It is simply a HTML page incorporated with some Java codes somewhere. So less technicality is involved in the development process of a JSP page. So developing a JSP page is comparatively easier than developing a servlet. As servlets are pure Java programs, lot of technicalities are involved in developing a servlet. As JSP is not a pure Java program, simply it is a HTML file, it becomes easier to develop a JSP page. So as far as this is concerned, JSP is more advantageous than a servlets. So as far as the developer is concerned, JSP technology is easier to develop the web applications. So when the web application is developed using JSP, and when client sends request using a JSP page to the server, at the server side before execution, the JSP page gets translated into servlet. Then the server executes the servlet, because server is a Java enabled software that can execute only a Java file. That is the reason why before execution JSP gets translated into servlets, then servlets are executed by the servers. Accordingly, the life cycle is defined. The JSP life cycle is defined accordingly. This is the life cycle diagram of JSP. This one is the life cycle diagram of JSP.
Sir, kindly change the page, sir.
It has already been changed.
Not visible.
Now visible, sir. At that moment, that image was not visible, sir. That PPT was.
Okay, this is the life cycle diagram of JSP. What we discussed just now, that is depicted in this diagram. You try to understand the diagram. The client sends the request in the form of a JSP page. You see the top of the diagram. The client, you must be knowing what a client is. Simply client is a browser. That may be Google Chrome or something like that. When client sends the request in the form of a JSP page, then at the first step, very first step, JSP page gets translated into servlets. The diagram shows that server receives the JSP page, JSP translator translates the JSP page into a servlet. Servlet is a Java file. Then servlet is compiled so that the respective class file is generated. Servlet is a .java file. So Java compiler compiles the servlet into a .class file. Now that .class file that goes to the servlet container for execution. So .class goes to the servlet container. In the .class file, it is having three important components. First part is initialization component. Second part is request service component. Third part is the after execution, after request processing, the servlet must go out of the memory. So garbage collection component. These are the three components. After conversion, after translation of the JSP into servlet, servlets gets compiled into .class file. Now .class file is a pure Java file that is having three parts, three components. Initialization components takes care of all initialization requirements before request processing is done. For example, If database connectivity is required, then that part is handled in the initialization module, may be handled in the initialization module. If any file needs to be opened, then that part can be handled in the initialization module. So these are all some of the examples of initialization. So before request processing is done, initialization part is handled. And initialization part is handled by a method that is JSP init. It is depicted in the diagram. JSP init is the method that takes care of the initialization. After initialization is done, then request processing happens. For whatever purpose the client sends the request, that is processed here in this module, in this method. So there is a method in the class file that is JSP service. So JSP service takes care of the request processing. Requests get processed, responses get generated, and responses, after generation of responses, the responses are sent back to the client. All those things are done by the JSP service method. So after processing of all the requests coming from the clients, when server checks that all the requests are processed, then finally the destroy method gets executed. JSP destroy. The purpose of this method is to take care of the garbage collection. Whatever is there into the memory, all those things are treated as garbages, and those garbages are collected. That means memory becomes clean. After destroy method gets executed, nothing is left in the memory. This is how the servlet gets executed. So fundamental thing is the life cycle is consisting of 3 phases. The JSP life cycle is consisting of 3 phases. First phase, translation phase. JSP page gets converted into servlets. Second phase, execution of servlet by the server, a request processing of the servlet by the server. That is second phase. Third phase, everything that is done under the environment of JRE, Java Runtime Environment. Servlet object gets created. Using that servlet object, request processing is done. Dynamic content is generated, and the response in the form of dynamic content is sent back to the client. So cycle completes here. So this is how a JSP page gets executed. As I told you, either
Sir,
can yes.
sir, third phase, which one, sir?
Third phase is the response generation and sending the response back to the client in the form of dynamic content.
Sir, JSP are basically there are three phases, sir. Translation phase, servlet execution phase, and third one.
Then sending back the response to the client in the form of dynamic content.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So this is how the JSP gets executed. As there are two technology, servlet and JSP, either you can use servlet or you can use JSP to fulfill your purpose. What is to be used? That depends on the developer. If you are technically very strong, you can use servlet. Or it will be easier for you to use JSP for developing web pages. So primary purpose of JSP is to develop dynamic web contents. So for generating dynamic web contents, you can use JSP. And this is what JSP lifecycle is. There are primarily three methods: JSP init, JSP service, and JSP destroy. As I told you, JSP init method handles all sorts of initialization. JSP service method deals with request processing, and JSP destroy method takes care of the garbage collection part. So whatever method you want to use, that depends on the developer. Now, let us come to a discussion how exactly a JSP page can be developed. How can you be able to develop a JSP page? Primarily, JSP page is a HTML page. That means HTML tags or HTML elements are used for developing a HTML page. You must be knowing what are the HTML tags available. There are many HTML tags. Those tags can be used for developing HTML page. To make a HTML page a JSP page, you must incorporate some Java code somewhere in the HTML page so that it becomes a JSP page. So how to? Now the question is how to include Java code in a HTML page. For that purpose, there are three components of HTML page. Using three components, you can add Java codes within a HTML page. So three components are directive components or directive elements, scripting elements, and action elements. We can say that these are the components of JSP. So there are three components of JSP: directive elements, scripting elements, and action elements. Using these three elements, we can include Java codes into a HTML page. When Java codes are included into HTML page, the page becomes a JSP page. It can be sent to the server for request processing. Now, what is a directive element? What is scripting elements? And what is action element? The structure of directive element is given here in the presentation. The directive element is used in this way. As the name indicates, directive element helps in giving direction to the server, what to do or what not to do. Directive element gives direction to the server to do some specific operation. As far as this is concerned, there are three types of directives: page directive, include directive, and tag lib directive. Tag lib matlab tag library. The purpose of page directive is to include a page. What type of page we are using? The structure of directive tag is given above, given in this presentation. Angle bracket followed by a percentage, then at the rate symbol, then directive attribute is equal to value, the tag ended with percentage and another angle bracket. This is how the directive tag is used. Directive attribute is equal to value. Here attribute is page. Attribute may be page attribute may be include attribute may be tag lib attribute. As per the requirement, we can use any attribute. So directive, the purpose of directive tag is to give direction to the server to do a specific operation. Second type of element is scripting element. So scripting elements are of three types. Declaration element, expression element, and scriptlet element. Scripting elements are of three types: declaration, expression, and scriptlet. As the name indicates, the purpose of declaration element is to declare variables and methods which we are going to use in the page. What variables we are going to use in the page, in our code, what methods we are going to use in our code, all those things are declared. So for declaration of variables and methods, the declaration tag is used, the declaration element is used. Similarly, expression element. Expression element, the purpose of expression element to specify a valid Java expression within this element. Any valid Java expression can be used within this element. That's why the name is expression element. Scriptlet element. Scriptlet element carries the actual Java code which is responsible for request processing. So request processing part is written within the scriptlet element. The Java code which is primarily responsible for processing the client's request, that is incorporated within the scriptlet tag. The structure of all the three tags are given here. How declaration tag is used, how expression tag is used, and how scriptlet tag is used. Declaration tag is used for the purpose of declaring variables and methods. Expression tag is used for the purpose of specifying valid Java expressions. Primarily, it is used for displaying output. So out statement is used here. Whatever is specified within the expression tag, that will be displayed at the client side. Similarly, scriptlet tag, actual Java code which does the request processing, is specified within the scriptlet tag. So these are the three elements that comes under the category of scripting elements. So first category is directive elements, second category is scripting element, third category is action element. There are certain actions that needs to be done by the server. Those actions are specified with the action elements. Some specific tasks that has to be done by the server. What specific task the server will do, that is specified with the action tag. Normally, action tags are XML tags. Action tags are not HTML tags, they are XML tags. You might be knowing the difference between HTML tag and XML tag. I assume that you must be knowing all these things. So action tags are not HTML components. Action tags are XML tags. Action tags are used for the purpose of specifying some specific action that is to be done by the server when request gets executed. For example, Java beans. Java bean is a specialized software component that performs a specific operation. You can develop a Java bean for doing a specific operation. There may be many Java beans in a web application. A sophisticated web application may contain many Java beans. A Java bean is a software component, reusable software components that can be used again and again. As and when required, the application can use the Java bean. So Java bean is a reusable software component. So as and when it is necessary for execution of a Java bean, it may be specified with a action tag, JSP action tag. So when JSP action tab specifies the name of a Java bean, the server executes that Java bean and performs that specific operation for which the Java bean is developed. So primarily, there are three components of a JSP page: directive components, scripting component, and action component. As I told you, there are three types of directive: page directive, include directive, and tag lib directive. All these directives are used in the JSP page to give certain directions to the server to do something. Second is scripting components. There are three scripting elements: declaration element, expression element, and scriptlet elements. Declaration element is used for the purpose of declaring variables and methods. Expression element is used for the purpose of specifying a valid Java expression. And scriptlet element carries the actual Java code which processes the request. Then third component is action component. JSP action component are XML components. They are used for the purpose of giving the instruction to the server to do some specific task like execution of a Java beans. So these are the three major components of JSP using which we can develop a JSP page. You must have practical components. When you do your practical, then all those things you may practice. How to develop a JSP page using all these tags. And when a JSP page is developed, how to send it to the server as a request, and how the request gets processed at the server's end, and how server generates the response, and how it sends the response to the client. All those things you must practice in your practical sessions. Then another important component, another important concept, that is implicit objects used by JSP. As you know, JSP is a Java technology. JSP is a Java technology. As Java is a pure object-oriented programming language, everything is represented in terms of objects. We are incorporating Java code into JSP page. When we are incorporating Java code, we must be using objects. There are certain implicit objects that can be used. without worrying about their creation. Implicit object matlab that is readily available to you. Directly you can use that in your program. So ready-made objects. So implicit objects are Java objects that can be used directly. You need not have to create those objects. They are readily available to you. So in this table, some implicit objects are given. Out is a, for example, out is a implicit object. In Java, when we want to produce the output, we need to use a method, that is println method. Println method is used for the purpose of producing output. But println method cannot be used directly. Println method is invoked by using the out object, and out object belongs to the system class. So full instruction is system.out.println. Then only output is produced. As far as Java is concerned, you must use system.out.println, then only output will be produced. But in case of JSP, when you want to produce output, the system.out.println that need not have to be used. In place of that, directly you can use out object. So out object is responsible for producing the output. So simply we can write out.println. In a JSP page, when we write out.println, the output will be produced. Out is a implicit object that is available in JSP. Directly we can use it for producing output. Similarly, request object is there, response object is there, page object is there, application object is there. All these objects are implicit object available, readily available for the developer to use these objects in the web application. Request object is used for the purpose of dealing all the requests. Every request is represented by a object, that is request object. Response object, after response gets generated by the server, the response itself is represented by a object, that is the response object. The response is sent back to the client with the help of response object. So request object is an implicit object that deals with all types of requests. Response object is an implicit object that represents the responses. Out object is an implicit object that is responsible for producing the output at the client side. Session object is an implicit object that represents the whole session during which the conversation takes place between client and server. A session represents the conversation that takes place between client and server. And the entire session is represented by an object, that is session object. Similarly, application object, page context object, config object, exception object. All these objects are implicit objects. They are available readily for the developer to use these objects into the web applications. Without developing them, without declaring them, all these implicit objects can be used. So, before going to develop a JSP page, we must know that there are three components of JSP and there are some implicit objects using the components and implicit objects, we can develop a JSP page. Another concept is exception handling. You must be knowing what an exception is. There is a exception handling mechanism in Java. There is a difference between error and exception. Exceptions occurs during runtime. Errors are caught during compile time. When Java program is compiled, during the process of compilation, the errors are detected. So during compilation, errors are detected and those errors can be corrected by the developer. Nothing harm will occur because during compilation, the compiler shows us the errors. See, these are the errors that is there into the program. We can identify the errors and we can make necessary corrections. So no harm will happen. But once compilation is done, some errors are there. Those errors are not caught during the compilation. The errors which are not identified during compilations, they are identified during execution. Those errors are called as exceptions. So the errors that are not identified during compilation, they may be identified during execution of a program. Those errors are called as exceptions. When the program gets executed, when a program starts executing, during the execution time, exceptions occur. When exceptions occur, the program execution stops abruptly. The execution can never go forward. It stops abruptly. Then and there the execution stops when exception occurs. So abrupt ending of the execution of a application, that will not give the right result. The purpose will not be fulfilled. That is why exceptions need to be handled properly. When exceptions are handled properly, then program execution will not stop abruptly. It will go on. So for that purpose, for dealing with exceptions, there is a mechanism in Java that is called as exception handling. There is also the mechanism in JSP that is called exception handling mechanism. The exception handling mechanism in Java is different from the exception handling mechanism in JSP. There is a broader scope of handling exception in JSP. In Java, we can handle exception using try-catch block. In JSP, we can also handle exception in try-catch block. In JSP page, try-catch block can also be there, can also be used to handle exceptions. But apart from that, there are other mechanisms also. So scope is broad in JSP for handling exceptions. There are two directives. One is error page directive, another is error page directive. So two directives are used for this purpose. So using these two directives, we can handle exceptions. For handling exception, a specific JSP page may be designed. And that can be included using error page directive. Using error page directive, we can include a JSP page that will handle our exceptions. So there is a primary JSP page that is developed for request processing. there is another small JSP page that is used for handling our exceptions. So in the primary JSP page, we can include the error page, so that as and when exception occurs, that error page is activated, gets activated, and that starts executing to handle the exceptions. So either in JSP page, we can use try catch block in the scriptlet element for handling exceptions, or we can use error page tag in the directive element so that we can handle exceptions. So these are the two ways for handling exceptions in JSP. So number one is, we must know what are the components that can be used for developing JSP. This is number one. Number two, we must know what are the implicit objects that can be used in a JSP page. Number three, we must know what is the mechanism for dealing with exceptions. These are the three important points that we must know before developing a JSP page. Now, another thing is connectivity, database connectivity. As we know, during request processing, the server may need some data. You try to recall, there is a model which is called as MVC. In the last class, we had discussed the models. And the popular model for web application is MVC, model, view, and control. In this model, MVC model represents, M stands for model. The model represents the database. The database that lies at the back end, at the server side. When server needs some data during request processing, so where from it will get the data? The necessary data can be fetched from the database. So for fetching data from the database, there must be a connectivity between the web application and the database. Web application is at the middle layer, control layer, MVC, C for control. The web application is at the control layer. Database is at the model layer. So web application which is at the control layer needs data, but data are there into the model layer. So how to get data from the model layer? How to get data from the database? So there must be a connectivity between the web application and the database. That connectivity is established first. After the connectivity is established, then the web application can fetch data from the database. So primary purpose of JSP is to request processing. So during request processing, the application may need some data. So before fetching data from the database, the JSP page must have connectivity with the database. So that is database connectivity. So how database connectivity is done? Suppose, let us consider a table name student. In a database, there may be many tables. Suppose a table is named as student, and that table is designed in the Microsoft SQL server. You can design the database in Oracle. You can design the database in SQL. You can design the database in MS Access. You can design the database in SQL server. There are many database tools for developing, for designing your database. Whatever the database tool may be, the database before dealing with the database must have proper connectivity with the web application. Then only data can be fetched from the database and they can be processed. Suppose there is a table named as student in the database which is developed using Microsoft SQL Server. And the table carries 3 columns: roll number, name, and course name. These are the 3 columns. So if this is the table is there into the database, and database is located at the model layer, at the lowest layer, at the bottommost layer. So our JSP page, which belongs to the web application. So how that connectivity is established? So for establishing connectivity with the JSP page, similar the case with servlet. Connectivity can also be established with the servlet. So for establishing connectivity with the JSP or establishing connectivity with the servlet, some steps are followed. So what are the steps for establishing connectivity? Is it visible to you?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Now is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So these are the steps for establishing connectivity. Let us consider a table named student. That table is created using Microsoft SQL Server. The table is having 3 columns: roll number, name, and program name. We need to use this table for keeping data into the table as well as retrieving data from the table. For doing this operation, storing data into the table and retrieving data from the table. So these operations we want to do using our web application, either using servlet or using JDBC. Using our web application, we can store data into the database. Using our web application, we can retrieve data from the database. Before doing these operations, there must be a connectivity between the web application and the database. So how to establish that connectivity? For establishing that connectivity, we need to follow certain steps. So these are the steps. The program is written here for establishment of the connectivity and retrieving data and inserting data into the database. Try to understand this code. A connection object, first a connection object is to be created. In this particular example, the con is the connection object. Second, a statement object needs to be created to represent the statement, the query statement, using which we can store data into the database, using which we can retrieve data from the database. So one object is con object, another object is statement object. This code is written for the purpose of storing data into the database. Then another object is URL. Third object is URL. URL is a string object that represents the name of the database server. JDBC JDBC stands for Java Database Connectivity. What database server we are using to deal with our database? As we are using SQL server, so that name is specified here. URL is equal to name of the server. This is address of the IP address of the server. This one is the user ID. This one is the password using which we can access the database, and this is name of the database. So these are the parameters that has to be specified for creating a URL object. URL object represents our database server with the database, the server that carries the database. So first is connection object, second is statement object, third is the object that will represent our database, then fourth is specifying the driver. Driver means the database software which we are using. We are using SQL server, that is the name of the driver. Every software has its own driver. Oracle has its own driver. Access has its own driver. SQL has its own driver. SQL server has its own driver. As we are using in this example, we are using SQL server. So this is the name of the driver, SQL server driver. So com.microsoft.jdbc.sql server driver. Now the driver gets activated. Class.forName. ForName is a method that belongs to this class. So class.forName, the driver name. Now connectivity is established through the con object. This is con object using which connectivity is established. Driver manager dot get connection URL. URL represents the database server which is at the back end. So get connection method is responsible for establishing connectivity with the server. Now connectivity gets established. After connectivity is established with the web application and the database, then we can deal with the database. We can insert data into the database. We can retrieve data from the database. This code is written for inserting data into the database. This particular code is written for inserting data into the database. Similarly, this code segment is used for the purpose of retrieving data from the database. One is used for inserting data into the database, another is used for retrieving data into the database. Before doing these operations, there must be a connectivity. So these are the code segments for dealing with the database. Primarily, there are 3-4 operations that can be done with the database. In future sessions, we shall discuss in detail all those operations. Insert operation, retrieve operation, update operation, and delete operations. These are the 4 basic operations that can be done using a database. Before doing all these operations, there must be a connectivity. So connectivity is established using con object, whether it is a servlet program or it is a JDBC program. First of all, we must establish connectivity before dealing with the database. So primarily, before developing a JSP page, we must be knowing these fundamental things. What are the components of JSP? What are the implicit objects available in JSP? what is the method of connecting the JSP with the database, how to deal with exceptions in a JSP page. So these are all some of the fundamental things you must know before developing a JSP page. So till now, including the last session, what we discussed? We discussed two technologies. One is servlet technology, another is JSP technology. Both the technology can be used for developing applications that are responsible for request processing. And both the technology, servlet technology and JSP technology, are used to develop dynamic web contents that can be executed at the server side. And as far as a web application is concerned, either servlet or JSP or both can be used. In some cases, you can use servlets. In some other cases, you can use JSP. So both technology can also be used in a single web application. So it depends on the developer what to use, what not to use, what is convenient for the web application, web developer to use what technology. But both are available for us. Now we shall come to the next important concept in this particular session. After knowing the technologies for development of web applications, now we shall discuss under what environment these technologies can be used. Servlet can be used, JSP can be used, but what are the is there any ready-made environment? Is there any ready-made framework within which we can use these technologies comfortably? That we shall discuss now. That is J2EE framework. Some frameworks available in general. In the last session, we had discussed in general what a J2EE framework is. In general, what is the architecture of J2EE framework?
Sir, PPT are not visible.
Is it visible now? In the last session, we discussed in general what a J2EE framework is and what is the architecture of J2EE framework. The J2EE framework is primarily based on MVC model. MVC stands for model view control. The front layer, J2EE framework is a layered architecture. And the architecture is consisting of primarily three layers: front layer, middle layer, and back layer. Front layer represents the view. Whatever is presented to the user, that is presented in the view layer. That is the front layer. And front layer contains the user interface. Using user interface, graphical user interface, the user interacts with the web application. That is view layer, which is at the front of the application. At the back of the application, that is model layer. Model layer contains the database. and within the model and view there is a middle layer, that is control layer. Control layer contains actual program logic, the application logic. That application logic is developed using servlet or JSP. That we discussed vividly. So the middle layer, control layer, that contains the application logic. Application logic may be developed using servlet or JSP. This is the broad idea of MVC model. And using MVC model, the J2EE framework is based upon. The J2EE framework is based on the MVC model. Today, in this session, we shall discuss some specific frameworks that is based on J2EE architecture. There are many J2EE frameworks. Today we are discussing about Struts 2, Apache Struts 2.x. So this is a specific web application framework based on J2EE architecture. It supports complete application development, starting from building process to the maintenance process. It is a framework that supports everything for developing a web application, starting from building the web application to the maintenance of the web applications. As I told you, as it is a J2EE framework, it is based upon MVC design pattern. It is written in the third point, the business logic, the application logic, that is isolated from the user interface, because user interface is at the view layer. User interface is at the view layer and application logic is at the control layer. So definitely application logic is isolated from the view layer, user interface layer. Application logic interacts with the database which is at the model layer, which is at the back layer. It is written in the fourth point. The application logic interacts with the database which is in the model layer. And model layer is at the lowest level of the design pattern. For interacting, application logic interacts with the database. For this interaction, application logic is to interact with the database which is at the model layer. For this interaction, connectivity is necessary. Database connectivity. For establishing database connectivity, there is a technology that is called as JDBC, Java Database Connectivity. Using JDBC technology, the connectivity is established first, then only application logic can be able to interact with the database which is at the model layer. A view is responsible for exhibiting data, presentation of the data, and presentation of the data is done at the client side. That is response. Whatever response is generated by the server, response is sent back to the client. And the client is nothing but the browser. So browser has the capability to interpret the HTML page. So whatever response is generated at the server, they must be represented in the form of a HTML page. That HTML page is sent back to the client for the presentation of information to the user. So view is responsible for presentation of the data in the form of a HTML page. And controller, within view and model, there is a controller layer Controller layer contains the application logic, which is either in the form of servlet or in the form of JSP. So struts 2.x, Apache struts 2.x is Apache struts 2.x is a J2EE framework that is based on this architecture, MVC architectural model. Now these are the features of struts 2. It allows POJO objects, as it is a Java based framework. It allows the use of POJO. POJO matlab plain old Java object. Plain old Java object. It supports some tags. Some ready-made tags are there which can be directly used in the struts. The purpose of using these tags is to reduce the size of the code. If you use some ready-made tags, you need not have to write codes for that tag. Those tags are predefined tags, they can be directly used. So that is tag supports. It is also having Ajax support. Ajax supports. Ajax matlab asynchronous JavaScript and XML tags. What is JavaScript? What is the purpose of using JavaScript? All those things must be known to you. So strut2 is a framework that handles asynchronous requests using Ajax tags. And the major advantage of using Ajax tag is it improves the performance. So struts2 is a framework that supports this feature also. Another thing is easy integration. With struts2 framework, we can integrate other frameworks also, like Spring, Hibernate. We are developing our web application using struts2. As and when required, we can also integrate another framework, Spring framework. Spring is also a J2EE framework, like struts. So both can be integrated together. We can develop our web application using both the frameworks simultaneously. That facility is also available. So that is integration of multiple frameworks for developing our web application. That feature is also available. Plugin support. Plugin support matlab the external software components can be plugged into our web applications. In strut2 language, the external components are known as interceptors. So there may be many interceptors. They can be plugged into our web applications. So that support is available here. Primarily, that support can be used for the purpose of creating views with the help of readily available templates, with the help of readily available design formats. So plugin support is also available. So these are the features. There are many other features also, profiling features that can be used for debugging purposes, tag modification features. Then it requires less configuration. So initialization configuration is less. We can use many view technologies for presenting data to the user. Yes, apart from HTML, we can also use free makers. We can also use JSP view. We can also use velocity. These are all different view technologies that can be used with the Struts framework for presentation of data, for presentation of information to the client. So these are the features which makes Strut 2 a very strong framework that can be used to develop web applications. Now this is the architectural diagram. This is the architectural diagram of Struts 2. There are 8 steps in the request response cycle, starting from sending request by the client to receiving response from the server. During this phase, there are 8 steps, and all the 8 steps are depicted into this flow diagram of Struts 2. At first step, client sends request. There is a front controller. The request is sent to the front controller by the client. When client sends request, the front controller receives the request. This is not the actual controller. Actual controller sits in between the model and view. Actual controller sits in between the model and view. But in this framework, in this particular framework, client doesn't send request directly to the controller. It sends the request. There is a middle layer between the client and the controller. Client sends request to the front controller, because front controller is responsible for mapping the interceptors with the web application. Just now we discussed there are some pluggable elements. As far as Strut 2 is concerned, it supports plug-in feature. So there are from pluggable elements. Those elements are called as interceptors. In the diagram, the vertical bars between step 3 and 4, these are all interceptors. These are all pluggable elements. These can be plugged in, and as and when operation is over, they can be plugged out. So these are called as interceptors. It is the job of the front controller to map these interceptors into the application. So interceptor may be used for the purpose of validation. Interceptor may be used for the purpose of presentation of data to the client. There are many purposes of interceptors, pluggable elements. One interceptor may be used for validation of data, for authentication of that data, for ensuring what user wants to access the application. That authentication can be done by the interceptor. Similarly, when response comes from the server, it is also job of another interceptor to present those response to the client. So there are many purposes of interceptors. So for mapping those interceptors, the front controller is used. So step number 1, client sends request, front control receives. Step number 2, mapping is done with the interceptors. Step number 3, interceptors does their jobs before uh, the request passes over to the controller layer. Then request goes to the controller layer. Within the controller layer, there exists business logic. So business logic may be in the form of servlets or JSP. For processing the request, if necessity arises, then it may have connectivity with the model. Model carries the database. So there is a two-way communication between business logic and the model. Interaction with the database constantly takes place during request processing. So that is depicted in step 5 and 6. Connectivity is established and insertion of data and retrieval of data that takes place between these two layers, control layer and the model layer. So after request processing is over, then view is generated, that is response. Response gets generated, that is depicted in step number 7. When response gets generated, step number 8 is it is presented through another interceptor. The response is presented to the client through another interceptor. Through the interceptor, the response goes to the client. So here the cycle is completed. So this is how the Struts framework works. That is defined here. This is the working of Struts 2. Whatever we have just discussed just now, that is defined here. Client sends HTTP request to the server. Then server, at the server side, the front controller receives the request and it matches it, it maps it with the URL mapping. Third step. URL mapping is done with the interceptors. Then request goes to the business logic. Business logic which is there at the controller end, it establishes connectivity with the database. Then request processing is done. Response is generated. A response is generated in the form of a view. In a view technology can be used here, either JSP view technology or HTML view technology, whatever the view technology that may be used here. Then with another interceptor, the view is presented to the client. This is how the Strut works. So Strut is a readily available framework that can be used for the purpose of developing web applications. Similarly, another framework is Spring. Another framework is Spring Boot. One is Spring MVC, another is Spring Boot. Like Struts, there are also two other important frameworks. Spring Boot is a framework, Spring MVC is a framework. In the next session, probably, we will discuss the details of Spring MVC and Spring Boot. And the difference between Spring MVC and Spring Boot, which is more advantageous than over the other. So Struts is a framework, Spring Boot is a framework, Spring MVC is a framework, Hibernate is also a framework. But as far as these frameworks are concerned, there is a difference. There is a specific purpose for which Hibernate framework is used. The purpose of Struts, Spring Boot, Spring MVC, the purpose of these three remains the same. But the purpose of Hibernate is little different from other three frameworks. So Hibernate is a special purpose framework. That is not a general purpose framework like Struts and Springs. Struts and Springs, they can be used for the purpose of developing web applications. But Hibernate is used for the purpose of ORM mapping. That is the very purpose for which Hibernate is used. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. Please try to understand what is ORM. As the diagram indicates, database is at one side, Java objects is at other side. In database, as we know, data are stored into the database. Data are stored into the database in tabular form. Suppose a student data. A student data contains the roll number of the student, name of the student, and date of birth of the student, for example. So all the three data related to a particular student are stored in a row in the database. There may be thousands of rows in a database containing information of thousands of students. Each row contains the information of a single student. If there are 1,000 rows in the database, then information of 1,000 students are stored into the database. But on the other side, our web application is a object-oriented web application. Everything is represented in terms of objects. So there lies the gap. Web application deals with the data in the form of objects. Database deals with the data in the form of a row, non-object. So there is a gap between object and the data stored into the database, non-object. So that is the reason why ORM is necessary, object relational mapping. The relational data which is at the database, they are mapped into the object data which is dealt with by the web application. So web application deals with data in the form of object. Database deals with the data in the form of relational way. So when web application wants to access the data, so data is fetched from the database. Data is fetched from the database and they are mapped into the data objects. That process is known as ORM, object relational mapping. So Hibernate is a lightweight open source Java framework that does this ORM mapping. That is what is written here, and that is what is depicted in the diagram. Hibernate implements the Java persistence API specification and bridges the gap between Java objects and the relational database. That gap is filled up by the Hibernate mapping. So as far as Hibernate is concerned, this is a special purpose framework that does this mapping only. Whereas other frameworks like Struts and Spring, they are all general purpose frameworks. They are used for the purpose of developing web applications. Now I think it is clear to you. In the next session, we shall discuss some other J2EE frameworks like Spring Boot, Spring MVC, etc. The next session, I think, is today up to
4 to 6, sir. 4 to 6.
4 to 6. 4 to 6. Okay, okay. So we shall meet again in the next session. That
About
is
which topic,
today.
sir? Spring Boot.
Perhaps. I don't
Yes, sir.
remember.
Okay, okay.
Perhaps the next
You
session.
told in the earlier class, sir.
Okay. ठीक है. So
Sir,
next
can you
session.
send the PPT, sir, in the group?
Okay. I shall send the PPTs to you.
Okay. ठीक है. Thank you so much. ठीक है.
So with this, we finish this session. Again, we shall meet at 4 o'clock today. Okay.
Okay. Sir, what about the attendance, sir? Today's session attendance?
I do not know. Your administrator must have taken the attendance.
Sir, actually, we will put attendance in the chat box, sir, and teachers copy that attendance in a separate
सर
file.
4 o'clock पे हमारी सेंटर में क्लास है सर, ओडीएल वालों की प्रैक्टिकल क्लास।
4 बजे तो अपनी क्लास है नहीं।
आज है ना सर की क्लास 4 बजे से।
Is there any other class?
यस सर, प्रैक्टिकल क्लास है सर सेंटर पे।
सर तो वो तो ओडीएल वालों की है ना, ये तो ओएल वालों की चलती है सर।
ओएल वालों की भी नहीं है। आप
अच्छा।
सीट
But I have been given this assignment.
सर आपकी क्लास हमारे ओडीएल वालों में अभी 11 से 1 है सेकंड, 4 से 6 नहीं है सर।
या इवन एमसीओएल के भी 11
नहीं, मेरा
11 से ही है
क्लास
सर की
तो
क्लास।
4 o'clock में है ना।
नहीं सर, 11 o'clock से है।
11 o'clock से है सर।
नो
अभी से ही है।
11 to 1।
मेरा क्लास 11 o'clock नहीं है।
एक मिनट मैं चेक कर ले रहा हूँ।
4 sessions have been assigned to me. 2 have already been completed. Another 2 is there. 2 sessions are there. One is
सर आपकी क्लास 11 से 1 ही है।
मेरा क्लास नहीं है यार, वो मेरा नहीं है।
मई है ना। एक मिनट सर, मैं चेक कर ले रहा हूँ। सैटरडे नहीं सर, अकॉर्डिंग टू एमसीओएल ये सर स्केड्यूल, ये आपकी क्लास 4 से 6 है।
हाँ यस,
4 से 6 है श्योर सर।
4 से 6।
बट अकॉर्डिंग टू एमसीए ओडीएल 11 to 1 है।
11 to 1 है ओडीएल में।
सर कंफ्यूजन ये है ना सर कि एमसीओएल का स्केड्यूल अलग है सर, जिसके अकॉर्डिंग आपकी क्लासेस 4 से 6 है, और ओडीएल का जो स्केड्यूल है सर उसके अकॉर्डिंग आपकी क्लासेस 11 से 1 है।
वो मेरा नहीं है।
नहीं आपका ही नाम है सर।
एक बार आप देख वेरीफाई कर लेना सर आप कि 11 से 1 क्लास लेंगे या 4 से 6।
एक शेड्यूल मेरा पास आया है, ओनली वन शेड्यूल मेरा पास आया है। According to that schedule, my class is from 4 to 6 today, and another class will be from will be on tomorrow. Tomorrow 4 to 6 perhaps. There are 2 sessions left for me. One is today 4 to 6, another is tomorrow 4 to 6.
फिर
Okay.
ओडीएल वालों को तो छोड़नी पड़ेगी सर आपकी क्लास आज और कल दोनों टाइम। आप चेंज कर सकते हैं तो देख लीजिए सर, 9 से 11 कर लीजिए।
Tomorrow we can take 9 से 11. Tomorrow there is a session for me that is from 4 to 6. If you want, that session may be preponed to 9 to 11. That can be done.
ठीक।
But today,
Yes, sir, that would be better.
but today my class is from 4 to 6. There is no other class in between.
ठीक है सर, थैंक यू सर।
Okay. So we shall
Thank
meet
you, sir.
again at 4 o'clock today. Okay.
Jafar, from where you have got this schedule? Can you share with us also?
Yeah, I will send it in. I will send you.
And please add my number also in that group where sir is sharing this presentation.
Okay.
No.
You have
This is
already.
my schedule. This is my schedule. I am sharing it with you.
Okay.
Now I am sharing it. This is my schedule. As far as my schedule is concerned, let me share this schedule just now. This is my schedule. Okay. One was on 27th April, 4 to 6. That was held. Okay. 3rd May, Saturday, 9 to 11. 3rd May again, 4 to 6. Then 4th May, again 4 to 6. We have already completed 2 sessions. Another 2 left. One is today from 4 to 6. Another is tomorrow from 4 to 6. This is my schedule.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Are you clear now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, today you will take class at from 4 to 6, no, sir?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Today,
I'm leaving.
today
I'm
I
leaving
shall
the
take the
class.
class from 4 to 6.
Okay, sir. I'm leaving the
So
class, sir.
also tomorrow.
Also tomorrow 4 to 6. Yes, sir.
4 to 6.
Yes, sir. I knew it.
Okay.
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 So can you take class 9 to 11 for tomorrow?
Yes, sir, but you have said that you will prepone the class to 9 to 11.
That we shall discuss in the coming session. 4 to 6 session.
Okay, sir. I will join at 4 to 6, sir. Thank you so much,
4,
sir.
4 to 6. Yes.
Sir, can you send me send us the PPT, sir?
Yes, definitely.
Okay,
Definitely.
sir. A lot of thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.